I am thinking about topics we can research, and we can look at the different ways in which communities express these struggles outside the communities in here. And I'm just thinking about that. I'm thinking about what Professor Garrett said about the cadre, because the history, for example, of the General Union of Palestine students, which has been very active on campus here, historically it was also about being part of the community and also part of the community within the student union. So there's all this kind of histories that, because we're so much under attack, we actually don't get to talk about the various topics that we can collaborate and research and work on out. And I'm kind of like thinking that this is, and I know the Ethnic Studies Task Force began to talk about this, but we're constantly in battle. So we're constantly having to defend ourselves and not talk about all of these other things. The other couple of issues that I was thinking about, the whole question of the community. And one of the things we've been warned about at San Francisco State here is to actually classes should not be opened. Classes are supposed to be only for the students because the students pay tuition. And this is a very big problem because the neoliberalism is actually making the university much more isolated. The last point is that Mr. Wu, Comrade Wu, I think that we really need to maybe, I want to challenge and I want to criticize, if that's okay, about maybe mixing up between Jewish and Israeli, because they're two different things. And while Palestine is part of Asia, and Asia, Southwest Asia, and we always say that, we refuse to say Middle East because it takes us out of Asia and Africa and puts us in this weird place that we belong to kind of like the colonial heritage and so on. Israel has not identified itself as part of Asia. So I think I want to kind of like make distinction between Jewish and Israeli, and what Jewish means and what Israeli means.
May I ask you something? The righteous struggle of the Palestinian people. The question is, how do we fit this into our discourse about ethnic studies and where we should go? So this is a very important point, that we frame our discussion so that it advances our discipline. And it doesn't mean that we stop talking about it. We have to talk, we have to for money. But the question, what I'm always concerned about is that we don't get the chance to talk about ethnic studies as a practice, right? As a practice. And I want to know, how do we practice ethnic studies? Some more ideas, because actually most of us are going to agree. I mean, if somebody's in here that's, well, I'm not going to do that. But I just think most people are going to be progressive and radical. People that think, if you're in ethnic studies, you're going to have to take a radical position against the established order. I mean against empire, but some people might not. But I'm just saying, I don't want us to just use a whole time talking about things we all agree on. The question, until we break the monopoly that the oppressor has on so many of our minds, liberation is not only impossible, it's unthinkable. You can't even imagine it, let alone do it.
Can I respond to something?
Yes.
That students can engage, and I think one thing that each one of the panelists, matter of fact, I don't think I know one thing that's a thread without question, is a renaissance to the community with respect to how it is that we identify in this particular practice of ethnic studies. My work is historical. One thing that Dr. Garrett stated that resonated with respect to being able to do critical historical work in terms of being able to capture memory was that it took him 20 years to be able to develop and identify, gather, and collect, and analyze primary resources. And I pray to God that I don't overstep in what it is that I'm about to say, because I'm new to the space. But I think one thing that must be a baseline practicum experience for all students, whether it's Black studies, whether it's Latinx studies, whether it's Asian studies, whether it's Native American studies, First Nation studies, is that all programs should have a practicum that ensures that students know how to do community-based archival research. So have you been able to collect the memories and the histories of each and every one of the programs, each and every one of the schools, each and every one of the collectives, formations, and organizations that come out of the spaces from which ethnic studies finds its genesis. So for every student that's in Black studies, not only is your class being taught, there's a couple of ways that we can actually get around, having to deal with bureaucracy, and I pray I don't overstep. If you have classes at a cafe, then those persons, for the most part, who are part of that community can now join and be able to come in to take part of the classes. Even if it's not in an overt sense, they can either come to question, or they can come as participants, with respect to being able to have a counter narrative within that classroom space. And then the last thing I'll say with respect to being able to collect memory and data is that each time that you have young people go out to not only collect artifacts, you find that you have a group of individuals who's been waiting to not only relinquish this data that's been sitting in the attic, that's been sitting in, chest of drawers, that's been sitting, waiting for someone to write this particular history. You now begin the snowball process of folks being able to state that we have a group of students out of SFSU who are out in this particular department, who are writing this history, and we now feel comfortable with providing them these resources in order for this history to not only be archived, but also for that collective memory to be now written. So that's just something I'd add, and I pray that I don't overstep, because as I said, I'm new to the space.
Yeah, all right.
Peace.
But I just want to say one quick thing about this issue about practicum. It seems to me that I'm kind of wired about the. Still, I have not met the Africana Studies faculty. I've met one or two people, but I haven't met the faculty this whole week. And so I guess people are ill, maybe ill, or whatever the problem is. That's an issue for me.
Me too. Me too. A real issue.
We have one way to focus on research. I was going to suggest to the Africana Study faculty there's Ray Tompkins here who's working in Bayview and Hunters Point with Black and Brown Asian community. Oh, you've already spoken to them?
No, and with Ramona.
And Dr. Tascoe on Superfund and the toxicity of that area. And he's come to this campus, 20, 30 times, trying to get faculty members to place students to do research in that arena with that community, or with those communities. Got help from Asian studies, got help from every other area except African studies. The majority of the people he was dealing with in Hunters Point and Bayview are people of mainly of African descent. That's one arena. Second arena, you can walk 1 foot off the campus and find a profound study area. It's called homelessness. A huge number of students on this. I remember that our thing was, you have to, if you're going to be, everyone on the campus who's black is a member of the Black Student Union. But in order to be a member of the Black Student Union, you have to recognize that every act you take has to be about taking care of the physical and intellectual well-being of your community. Otherwise, that's the one disqualifying part, right? You could be blonde, blue-eyed, whatever, it didn't make any difference what you look like. It only made a difference what your focus was, your frame of reference was. And you got homeless people. I mean, that's a project right there for all the Black studies, Asian studies, right off the campus. All the homeless people that I have run into just walking off the campus with all those trailers on. You guys don't know about this, I know you don't have an issue with this. But there are people who are living right off this campus day to day. Third thing, there are students on this campus, not only are they hungry, their families are hungry. We live in a time when we have one of the most ignorant people, perhaps, maybe the most significantly ignorant person on the planet is representing the interests of the American people. That is a crisis.
All by itself.
All by itself. So that's a crisis study, right there. What can happen in the next 30 years to reclaim the humanity of this country in the face of the 4 years of this particular human being? That's a whole study right there. How would that affect each community? I mean, that wouldn't be you don't have to worry about being bored. There are areas of study that seems to me to pop off every moment of every day that people can speak to. If that is the interest of the faculty, if that's in the interest of the faculty member, both individually and collectively, if the most important, the way things are structured now is they turns these state colleges not in the places where you're training the technocrats, but in institutions where you have to mirror the university without the benefits of the university, so that faculty members have to write the same books, etc., without the requisite positive things that they can gain from it. There's some work that faculty members, it seems to me, can do around that issue, of restructuring some of their work so that they can address some of the things that both Dr. Karenga at one hand and Brother Benson raised at those are things that people can do at a concrete level. How does that distill down in a transactional way down into the public schools? That's a massive piece of work right there. And that's, to me, when I heard that you guys are taking on that massive piece of work, the education of children, and to make it the least corrupted that you can. That's a piece of work. Do you start with the interests of the children in relationship to the amelioration of the community, or do you start with your own interests as it seeps out for the benefit? That is, the first interest is my own. That challenge is the thing that people will struggle with, because you're talking about what, $80 million to kick off? $80 million, that's good money. That's money that's for stealing, for putting to your own nonprofit, for setting up your own study place. There's money coming out of this. You're not going to run this project at the college level, the university level, or at the public school level without money.
All right.
Hopefully there's some deep discussions about who from your grouping is going to be sitting on the money. Because following the money is a critical piece.
Asante, Ken tell me that we have 5 more minutes, so we want to get in as many as we can in this.
You all are so amazing. And I want to say also too, you know, I think we're in similar times, but a different time as well. And I think Dr. Garrett, you totally talked about sort of the income issues of class. And I just want to bring up data with our students. 80% of our students, our first-year students, are students of color. But 1 in 5 are leaving SF State after their first year. And we surveyed them. We actually called them. We asked, why are you leaving? And everyone said it's finances.
Yeah.
It is $26,000 a year to attend San Francisco State. $26,000. We're talking tuition and housing costs. And so families are having to come up with $2,600 a month to go to school here. I know we also talked about faculty. Faculty are also struggling too. You know, no one lives in San Francisco anymore.
That's true.
No faculty member lives in San Francisco anymore. There's only no one lives in San Francisco anymore. It is just too expensive. We ourselves cannot live here. And so you know, a lot of our faculty live across the bridge. And so there's so even faculty and staff on this campus, there's such high turnover because people can't afford to live here. So these are issues that are affecting students, but also faculty and staff. And in terms of teaching and practice, I do want to make mention that I know, you know, with the commemoration and the remembrance that we as faculty could do better in telling the story of the strike. And this spring, we're committed to doing a faculty learning community and developing lesson plans and how we can better teach the strike and better integrate it with today. And so I know there'll be several faculty members working on lesson plans, and I think all of you are lesson plans. George, you're a lesson plan. Dr. Garrett, you're a lesson plan. Dr. Tascoe, you're a lesson plan. But also our members too here that are our strikers, your lesson plans. And so we're going to be coming to you to see how we can do better at telling your stories for this next generation. And so, yeah, those are just some of my comments and thoughts. Thank you.
Okay. It ain't that loud, my voice carries. I have a 2-part question. One, I also got to give Ken his prop, Jimmy, that when he was dean and I was doing research out there in Bayview, we worked out a deal where we got 2 of our students, unlike the department. I got my Latino sister. Hello, finally.
We're getting it.
She went on to became a nurse practitioner. And the other young sister went on, I wrote her a letter of support, and she's now finishing up her PhD at Rutgers in organic chemistry and working on some of the things I talk about, genetic variances and increased susceptibility to chemical exposure. Because the rest of you don't know that the medicine you take, the medical model is a 35-year-old white male. Has nothing to do with us in this room, nor our women. So I bring those into when we're doing evaluation, Ramona and also Dr. Simshad. We're getting ready to do biomarkers in terms of radiation exposure and chemical exposure in the black community. Where in the hell is Africana Studies? When we set this up, and I'm the third chairman after Jimmy in the Black Students Union.
All right.
We wrote, it is the Black Students Union that wrote the first Masters of Arts degree, Ron Bentley and myself, and reviewed by the Central Committee and submitted it to Black Studies.
Okay.
It didn't grow. When I came back in '80, and Phil McGee brought me in as adjunct dean, I wrote an outline for a PhD and an exchange program with North Africa with the help of Asa Hilliard. Brought $55 million. The faculty did not understand the business of education. To the scholars that are working on the credential, I have the third to last single subject teacher credential. Who's going to teach it? There is no credentials for secondary education. That's something you have to work out. So you set your criteria. What will be their educational experiences? Just because, like Thurgood Marshall said in his last speech, a snake is a snake, whether it's black or white. It will still bite you. I have some Negro leaders I wouldn't trust with 2 dead flies out there in the community or on this campus. The question of relevancy, I'm 100% in agreement with George. When we set this up, is to take your skills back to the community, whether you're an internationalist or a domestic. Our people need a clean glass of water. They need a clean breath of air. If you go to the continent of Africa or Asia, when we set it up, and Jimmy and Mariam Awadi, got to give sister her credit.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, you know, sister will tell you she's the mother of Black Studies.
Gee.
It was for setting up one, not only a degree in Black Studies, but also to either get a business degree or a degree in science to build your community. And like Ramona, I have a triple major out here. And it's like you lead through example. I do not see this relationship, and as others said, I have not seen one faculty member for Africana Studies attend. And if you study history, why aren't you then talking to those who set the bar and help write what you're getting a paycheck for?
Okay.
So it's like, oh, Dr. Karenga, one other thing. They cite you all the time. Please clarify me and educate me. I'm glad you're here.
Okay.
They say that under your philosophical approach that Africana Studies should not have any relationship with the community, but yet I'm hearing you here saying this is an important...
Who said that?
Several of the... You should go over, you should go to the faculty meeting.
That's that same Pantherite kind of character assassination that continues to go around the country.
No,
We got to quit that.
not in the department, but that is also not the position of the department. Let the department speak.
Well...
But that is not the position of the
Yeah,
department.
you know that. You can read one page on my book. See, that's not right.
I'm sorry.
I had to put it out there too.
Thanks, sir.
I ain't gonna back down off of it
Thank you,
because
sir.
they're not here.
But we got, okay, I appreciate it, but we got to get somebody. Now, you know what I want to say to people? Not too long. And we want to get some more people. We say we're going to break it 12:30. So the next person that speaks, think if you're going to let the next person after you speak too, okay? So, and I know everything you guys say is good.
That's right.
It's just a question of time. A discipline we need.
Quick comment?
Yes.
Quick comment?
Yes.
As a physician, I look at the chief complaint from the patient, and then I take a really good history to find out what's behind that chief complaint. And ultimately, I go through a differential to determine what are the factors that play into accounting for that chief complaint. This very methodical model works for me in transitioning between medical model for care and social model for care. I don't know to what extent that is of value to you, but it makes certain that you don't leave out any step along the way in considering all of the possible causes of failure, unhappiness, depression, anger, failure to thrive as in a social context. And I just want to share that with you and also commend this department, the California State University, all of the campuses, that you are doing this work, that you are listening to the community, not as much as you need to. There's room for improvement on that. And I really like the fact that you lifted up Dr. Hare's words, you affirmed that.
Yes.
We're hearing clearly from Dr. Wu. It is so critical that you don't put the cart before the horse. Find out what the community needs and let that help guide your curriculum development.
I just want to add one thing. Viewing from outside, it seems that all people with the various campuses, that there is a competition going on and comparing program, this program, that we need to realize that each community is different, each university, each college is different, that this really not comparative thing. And what we need to do is do what we get and serve our community. And I remember even in San Francisco State, in the beginning, the administration, when we accepted the school ethnic study, they throw in this AERM, right? American Ethnic Racial Minority Requirement, put you on the GE, everybody was so happy. And we say, no, that's not enough. Let's change GE, make sure that each category have our classes in it. And I think that established why we survive and fight today. And I think we need to keep that in mind. We need to call to our university course review committee, which one time I was there. Every course they put up, I say, I object. They say, why you object? I said, you have no ethnic study content in it. And we ought to continue to do that, because if we don't do that, we're going to have to fall up and go